It is in such an inhospitable environment, on a tension-charged night, that a desperate chase opens this film. A young woman runs for dear life in the forest. The men with swords, Angelique's pursuers, were relentless shadows in the night. With the lake in front of her, Angelique makes a desperate decision. She throws herself into the water. But then there's one catch. She doesn't know how to swim. Panic seizes her, and she flails her arms and legs, churning. She becomes engulfed by the water, pulling her under. 6 years ago, we caught sight of Angelique wearing her finest clothes. Reluctantly, she is getting ready to encounter the man to whom her family has arranged to marry her off, the Count de Peyrac. Angelique believes that if her brother were alive, he wouldn't allow this union. Soon, the Marquis of Andejos, a friend of the Count, joins the scene. The Marquis introduces himself as a friend of the Count. Angelique, fuming with rage, inquires of the Marquis about the absent Count. On the other hand, the Marquis promises her to leave immediately after completing the necessary formalities. Suddenly, Angelique's uncle arrives alongside his son, Philippe. As Angelique and Philippe lock eyes, they exchange greetings. Philippe's father is so smitten by Angelique's beauty that he regards her as a well-behaved young lady. But Angelique bitterly retorts that she is just nice enough to be sold to a foreigner. She departs immediately, leaving everyone in awe. Shortly after, they all meet to sign Angelique's marriage contract with the Count de Peyrac. Later, Angelique retreats to the stable, unable to accept her fate. Philippe attempts to calm her down, but when she pleads with him to intervene, he lets her down. Disappointed, Angelique mounts a horse and rides away. In the next scene, Angelique, lost in her thoughts within the forest, is joined by Nicolas. He implores her to run away with him, professing his love. However, Angelique crushes his hopes, viewing him as a brother. But then she drops a bombshell. If he truly loves her and wants to safeguard her, he must take her, as the Count would reject an adulteress. She kisses him, but Nicolas pushes her away before succumbing to his desire. Meanwhile, Angelique's father spots her horse from a distance. He rushes to the scene, finding Nicolas on top of his daughter. Threatening execution, he is surprised when Angelique defends Nicolas, declaring that she won't marry the Count if any harm befalls Nicolas. Angelique urges Nicolas to flee, apologizing for her impulsiveness. In the following scene, Angelique seeks solace in the confessional, pouring out her heart to the priest. She expresses her fear and sadness about marrying a man she neither likes nor desires. The priest reminds her that her family's welfare hangs in the balance, urging her to accept her sacrifice. He advises her to quell her anger and find inner peace instead. Curious, he wonders if Angelique harbors other sins from her past life. After a tense silence, she confesses a tormenting secret. She inadvertently caused a priest's demise. Taken aback, the priest promises to keep her revelation confidential. Angelique recounts a pivotal moment when her father sought financial aid from the Marquis de Plessis-Bellière. Left alone during their business discussion, Angelique encountered her cousin, Philippe. Smitten, he kissed her neck, startling her into fleeing. But what she overheard next was far graver. The Lord, along with the priest, was plotting to end someone using pure poison. Their target? The king promised sovereignty after his demise. The Lord handed the plotters to the priest for safekeeping, and when he stepped away, she seized the plotters and discreetly placed the poison bottle on the table's edge before escaping. Upon the Lord's return, he discovered the missing letters. Outraged, he accused the priest of betrayal, gripping him until he suffocated, the spilled poison staining the ground. The priest, having heard her story, inquired about the murderer, yet the scene remains sealed in silence. In the ensuing scene, we catch sight of Angelique on her way to her husband's castle. Angelique steps out of the carriage, and a man approaches, Count Geoffrey, her husband-to-be. But as she looks at him, her smile falters. He isn't certainly what she expected. However, she curtsies respectfully, hiding her disappointment. Later, in her room, Angelique is looking frustrated. This isn't the fairy tale she envisioned. She paces around searching for ways to break the deal. Maybe even make herself look so awful he'd send her home. Soon, Geoffrey enters the room, responding to her request to talk. Angelique blurts out her worries. Does he even know her? Are they really suited for each other? But Geoffrey cuts her off. He shatters her dream by revealing that he won't give up on her. He tells her to get ready. The wedding ceremony awaits. Geoffrey, ever thoughtful, suggests a small ceremony to celebrate her arrival. He prefers a private wedding in the charming chapel. He soon leaves her to prepare, mentioning how the red suit would look stunning on her. Angelique can't help but follow his order. The ceremony takes place in the quaint chapel. Angelique arrives, adorned in the red dress, and steals the show. Geoffrey marvels at her beauty as he ushers her in. They kneel before the priest to exchange vows. but Angelique notices a flicker of annoyance on the priest's face. Leaning in as the priest turns away, Angelique whispers to Jeffrey about her suspicion, believing that the priest doesn't like her. Jeffrey surprises her with a revelation. The priest is the Archbishop of Toulouse, and it's him, not Angelique, that the Archbishop dislikes. He even goes so far as to call him a devil. The night continues with a lively celebration. Music fills the air as people dance gracefully. Cuddled up with drinks in hand, Angelique asks Jeffrey why he didn't come for her himself, sending his henchmen instead. Jeffrey corrects her, explaining that they are not henchmen, but trusted friends. Angelique remains unconvinced by his excuse. Therefore, Jeffrey goes on, revealing his worry about the Archbishop and his followers taking advantage of his absence, as they had done before. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a servant raising a toast to the newly titled Count and Countess de Peyrac. Jeffrey proposes a toast to King Louis XVI and inveighs against obscurantism. The latter greatly displeases the Archbishop. Feeling the escalating tension, Jeffrey wonders if the Archbishop has anything against him. The latter shoots back the accusation that Jeffrey has a twisted mind for connecting the king with obscurantism. Jeffrey speaks of a bruising childhood, when as a little boy, he escaped with a Protestant wet nurse during a heinous war between Catholics and Protestants. He fell from a window, but was saved by a Catholic soldier, who returned him to his mother with a slashed face. Affirming his loyalty to the Holy Catholic Church, he warns the Archbishop that he will never cure his distrust of those who preach and fight in its name. The angry Archbishop hurls insults at him and leaves the table outraged, with his armed servants. Marquis Bernard d'Andios, ever faithful, defends Jeffrey, but a concerned Angelique questions him about the matter. Jeffrey reassures her that he is merely putting the Archbishop in his place, entreating respect and regard for boundaries. Without a word, the Archbishop storms away with his comrades. Later that night, after having her shower, Angelique puts on a towel and rushes to block the room's door by propping a chair against the doorknob. She soon reaches the Bible, but suddenly, Jeffrey enters the room. Angelique asks him to expect nothing from her. Jeffrey admits that he has waited for a woman like her for years, and waiting a few more days or weeks is within his power. Yet, steadfast in her decision, Angelique is never to surrender. Jeffrey draws closer, assuring her with calm composure that she is the one who will come to him with her own consent. In the following scene, a carriage arrives discreetly, revealing the Lord, to meet the priest abbot he earlier learned about Angelique's secret. He storms the place alongside his soldiers, where he urges the priest to inform him about the details. The priest reveals that Angelique only saw his hands adorned with rings, and one of the two crossed swords, and concerning the letters, he is left with no answer. Soon after their departure, the priest meets an unfortunate fate. The ensuing act takes place in the castle of the Count Plessis-Bellière. Accompanied by Fouquet, the latter wonders about his niece's whereabouts. He soon learns that she married the Count de Peyrac. Fouquet admits that Peyrac is a man of power, therefore, they need to get rid of Jeffrey in order to control Angelique. Much to their luck, Peyrac has made enemies in Toulouse. Subsequently, we find Angelique wandering through the castle's corridors until her journey leads her to Jeffrey's office, where a huge library spans an entire wall. Suddenly, the Archbishop joins her. He expresses his worries, hoping that she is unlike her husband, one of those so-called libertines. However, Angelique assures that she is deeply Catholic. The Archbishop wonders whether she practices witchcraft like her husband. Angelique, however, defends her husband, confirming that she knows of no censurable activity of Jeffrey. All of a sudden, Jeffrey walks in, prompting the Archbishop to exit the room. Jeffrey expresses his appreciation for her support. Angelique questions his actions by highlighting the forbidden books resting on his library's shelves, but Jeffrey believes that they are prohibited for no reason and cannot ignore facts. Yet Angelique cautions him that his blaspheming could be interpreted as heresy or witchcraft. In the following scene, Jeffrey and Angelique journey together to his gold mine. Jeffrey, securing her gently by holding her hips, guides her to the carrier. They descend into the depths to explore the intricate gold production process. Angelique is captivated by his intelligence and expertise as he explains each step. Later on, noticing her curiosity about gold, Jeffrey wonders what she would do with it. Angelique reveals that she would charter a ship and sail out to sea in search of her brother. Returning to the question, Jeffrey admits that it guarantees what he cherishes the most: freedom. Angelique soon asks him why he deprived her of it. Jeffrey confesses that her father convinced him that she agreed to be with him, but he was mistaken. Much to Angelique's surprise, Jeffrey grants her permission to go whenever she wishes. However, Angelique admits that her family cannot reimburse the amount of money he paid for them, but Jeffrey assures that he is not asking to be repaid. concerning their marriage, he will say that it was not consummated due to his incapacity. In the ensuing morning, after packing her belongings and on her way to the carriage, Jeffrey joins the scene to bid Angelique farewell. He hands her a stack of letters. He discloses that Margot informed him about Angelique's brother, whom she would devote her life to find him. He thought that only demise would halt him from sending letters via travelers he encountered. Therefore, he asked Angelique's father to search her late mother's belongings for letters that she may have received and omitted to pass on. And after looking long and hard, luck smiled upon them, and they succeeded in finding the letters. With tears in her eyes, Angelique receives them with an aching soul. Jeffrey wishes her a bright journey ahead of her. Excusing himself, he goes back to his experiments, seeking refuge in the realm of innovation. After Jeffrey's departure, Angelique rides the carriage alongside Margot and embarks on a new path. However, suddenly, a huge explosion halts her in her tracks. She hastily rushes back towards the castle to check on Jeffrey, who is found in a lousy condition. Upon checking on his well-being, Angelique sides with the Archbishop, believing that Jeffrey and his experiments are in thrall to the devil. On the other side, Jeffrey blames it on a slight miscalculation. He expresses his appreciation for her concern and apologizes for causing her delay. Once Angelique turns her back, determined to pursue her journey, Jeffrey collapses to the ground, prompting her to stay by his side. In the middle of the night, while Jeffrey is settling on the rocking chair, Angelique approaches him, conveying her gratitude for the letters. She plants a kiss on his forehead and wishes him a good night. In the following scene, we witness the encounter between the Marquis de Plessis-Bellière and the Archbishop de Toulouse. The latter admits that the Count de Pirac is not to be taken lightly. He reveals that his fortune will soon outstrip the church's and even the king's. However, the Marquis believes that there must be a weakness that can be exploited. The Knight de Germantas reveals that Jeffrey is in love with his wife Angelique. They decide to attend the castle's ball and seize the opportunity to get rid of him. On the night of the ball, a servant hands Angelique a secret letter. It reveals that she has to meet the correspondent by the fountain, warning that her loved ones are in peril. The ball starts. Elegantly dressed women grace the floor, while the men, impeccably attired in tailored suits. We catch sight of Jeffrey alongside his friend, Le Marquis d'Andillos, sharing a toast, when the waiter approaches him and delivers a secret letter. To catch his wife's suitor, he needs to be at the fountain later. A few words ignite Jeffrey's rage, yet he remains composed. Shortly after, Angelique glides in, capturing everyone's attention with her mesmerizing. Teasingly, Angelique conveys that her outfit subtly implies a desire to hasten Jeffrey's recovery. However, Jeffrey interprets it differently. It will accelerate her departure. He expresses his gratitude for the additional hours of happiness she brought into his life. Soon, Angelique rushes towards the fountain, as previously planned. The Knight de Germantas approaches her suddenly, grabs her face, and kisses her forcibly. Angelique pushes him and slaps him on the face, all of the events unfolding under the eyes of Jeffrey. Outraged, he intervenes and asks him to draw his sword. Angelique rushes towards him, convincing him that the knight is only trying to provoke him. However, Jeffrey is unwavering in his decision, believing that their honor is priceless. He seizes Andillos's sword, and with a determined grip, he faces the knight courageously. Angelique watches the scene with eyes full of dread. However, Jeffrey reveals unexpected and remarkable potential. In an unexpected turn of events, the knight injures Jeffrey, causing him to fall. However, he soon gathers his might and regains his composure. Jeffrey's exceptional skills help him bring the knight down with a precise strike to the neck, and when he is about to end him, Angelique pleads with him to stop. Therefore, he leaves the knight on the ground. Undeterred, the knight struggles to his feet and prepares to hit Jeffrey from behind, yet Andillos throws his knife smoothly into the knight's head, ending him instantly. Following these intense events, the servants tend to Jeffrey's arm, applying a piece of cloth soaked in healing herbs. Shortly after, Angelique approaches him, examining his wound out of concern. She soon expresses her desire to fulfill her conjugal duties. Caught off guard, Jeffrey questions her departure, much to his delight when Angelique assures her stay. Despite doubting her decision, Angelique is determined to give herself to him. Jeffrey draws nearer, touching every inch of her soft skin. He grabs her face into his hands and kisses her passionately. Their passion is palpable in the air as their breaths heighten and their hearts race. They end up on the bed, with their bodies intertwined, sharing fervent, intimate moments. Who knew a bandaged arm could lead to such an epic love story? In the ensuing morning, Angelique wakes up from a deep slumber with a wide smile on her face, as she contemplates her husband lying next to her with eyes full of affection. I guess falling in love starts with a firm no, and ends up with a heart full of yes. In the following moments, we glimpse into the blissful lives of the couple. The first scene captures Countess Angelique as she enjoys the swing, accompanied by her loyal servant Margot. In the second moment, we witness Angelique's delight as she swings alongside her firstborn son. Finally, the last scene reveals a contented family: Geoffrey, Angelique, and their 2 children. Their laughter echoes through the air as they embrace each other tightly. Little do they know that their happy days won't last long. Life has its twists and turns. On the other hand, the Count de Plessis-Belliere, together with Fouquet, continues to plot against Geoffrey. Fouquet reveals that the king is planning to marry the Infanta of Spain to ensure peace between the 2 countries. The wedding ceremony will be held at the border, but on their journey, His Highness will stay over at Peyracs Castle. With their insider in place, they are confident they can finally eliminate Geoffrey. In the tranquil forest, Geoffrey and Angelique lie on the ground. Their love is palpable, expressed through tender kisses and soft caresses. But their blissful moment is abruptly interrupted by a billowing cloud of dust, the herald of the king's imminent arrival. With urgency, they rise and hasten to the castle, where their servants help them don their finest attire. Hand in hand alongside their children, they step outside to warmly greet their monarch. Following the king's arrival, Philippe joins the king's entourage, as a faithful servant. Later that night, the festivities start with a grand party. Philippe approaches Angelique, assuming that she must be delighted since the crowds talk only about her and her husband. Angelique believes that they are talking about how Geoffrey is crippled and disfigured, but Philippe dismisses that, claiming that they are interested in his fortune compared to the king. He cautions her about the envy and trepidation that her husband's influence and wealth provoke in others. Soon, the king approaches Geoffrey, intrigued by his magical talent for extracting gold from rocks. Geoffrey explains to His Highness how he employs innovative methods to extract gold from minerals. The king, impressed, extends an invitation. If Geoffrey accompanies him to Paris, he will elevate him to the highest position. However, Geoffrey is convinced that he would be a provincial of his depth. He kindly requests to serve him well in the provinces, rather than badly in the capital. Therefore, the king approves of his request, under one condition: accompanying him to the quarry of gold. In the next scene, in the gold mine, Geoffrey explains the intricate process of extracting gold to the king. Meanwhile, the infiltrators led by the Count de Plessis-Belliere, with Fouquet and his shadowy companion, conspire in the shadows. While everyone is immersed in listening to Geoffrey, one of the infiltrators retreats to the wooden windlass and removes a screw. After learning about the full operation, it is time to go back to the castle. Geoffrey takes the lead for a security check, yet the king stops him. The king is first. Simultaneously, the Count de Plessis-Belliere is seen as terrified to the core, since the plan agreed upon is supposed to target Geoffrey, not the king. Suddenly, the windlass's handle cracks, sending rippling through the king and everyone present. The carriage plummets, but Geoffrey acts swiftly. With Philippe's assistance, he jams a stick into the wheel, preventing further disaster. Sighs of relief filled the air. The king hurries back to the castle, and the infiltrator is soon to meet a grim fate. Later that night, the Archbishop of Toulouse creeps into the king's mind as the devil, inciting him about Geoffrey. He reminds him that Geoffrey refused to follow his orders previously. He assumes that his behavior may be contagious, leading to chaos within the country. However, the king believes that Geoffrey isn't his enemy, nor does he challenge his authority. Still, determined to eliminate Geoffrey, the Archbishop advises the king to crush him. In the ensuing act, while Angelique is enjoying a deep slumber, loud noises shatter their tranquility. Geoffrey seizes his sword and rushes outside. Angelique follows suit, worried about her husband. Andihos informs Geoffrey that the king has departed, but soon Philippe announces Geoffrey's arrest. Left with no choice, Geoffrey pleads for a moment to bid her farewell. Angelique clings to him, with tears streaming down her face, but Geoffrey urges her to stay strong. He expresses his deep affection towards her before departing. The next morning arrives with disappointing news. Andihos admits having no information about Geoffrey's whereabouts. Undeterred, Angelique decides to visit Paris in pursuit of her husband. She reveals her intention to seek assistance from her uncle, the Count de Plessis-Belliere. Yet Andihos reveals Geoffrey's arrest is not a royal caprice, but instead a work of hidden enemies. Therefore, he advises her to trust no one. Meanwhile, in the Bastille, we find Geoffrey imprisoned in a dungeon, penning a letter. He hands it to Count de Plessis-Belliere, renouncing 1/3 of his fortune to the king. The Count initially interprets it as a loan, but Geoffrey insists it is a gift, intended to support his wars and building projects. Hoping this gesture will secure his peace of mind, Geoffrey pleads with the Count to personally deliver the letter to the king, unaware that he is being set up. Subsequently, Angelique seeks the Count's help. Disappointingly, he announces that no lawyer will defend Geoffrey. Angelique implores the Count to arrange a brief meeting with the king. The Count's face pales when Angelique reveals her trump card, an old story, the one involving the precious letters. Therefore, he promises to secure a meeting with the Privy Councillor, Prince de Condé. Delighted, Angelique is confident that her charm will lead her to the king. In the meantime, while Geoffrey is lying in the dungeon, a number of men join him. Once he questions about the unannounced visit, he knows that the Reverend Father Kircher is going to exorcise him. At night, Angelique's brother-in-law escorts her to a renowned lawyer in the region. Inside the dimly lit tavern, where destitute souls gather to drink and play cards, Angelique faces an unsettling encounter. A drunken man presses her against the wall, attempting to force himself upon her, but salvation arrives in the form of Sorbonne, a dog who intervenes to protect her. After following the dog to his master, Angelique approaches Desgrais. She notices his peculiar appearance and hesitates to proceed. Yet Desgrais halts her, admitting that he doesn't inspire confidence, but he's the sole advocate willing to take Geoffrey's case. Angelique joins the table, soon discovering that Geoffrey languishes in the Bastille. In the following act, we depict Desgrais visiting Geoffrey at the dungeon, where he finds himself in a lamentable situation. He informs him that Angelique hired him to defend him in the court. However, Geoffrey asks him to protect Angelique instead, believing that she is targeted. The following morning brings Geoffrey's first trial. The judge announces that Geoffrey has been stripped of his titles and dispossessed of his assets by the King's Council. He stands accused of practicing witchcraft and offenses deemed blasphemous to religion and state security. Desgrais, however, insists that Geoffrey had no intention of offending the noble institution. Following the trial, Mr. de la Reynie, the sheriff of the realm, addresses Desgrais in an attempt to alter his mind. He invites him to join him rather than fight desperate cases. Yet Desgrais rebuffs his offer, determined to win the case. Soon the sheriff departs empty-handed. In the meantime, Angelique overhears the conversation, and soon rejoins Desgrais, impressed by his loyalty. Suddenly, Margot rushes towards Angelique with a letter from her uncle. He has finally secured her a meeting with the Prince de Condé. Angelique and Margot hurry to the prince's castle. After a prolonged wait, Angelique encounters Prince de Condé. As she sips her coffee, her eyes fall upon the ring adorned with two crossed swords on his finger, a familiar ring from her childhood. Therefore, she decides to forego talking to him. The prince confronts her, revealing his knowledge of the stolen letters. He presents her with a stark choice: surrender the letter and ensure her survival. Angelique, unwavering, inquires about her husband's fate. However, the prince informs her that it is completely out of his hands. Still resolute, Angelique makes her exit, but the prince's question lingers. Was it worth losing everything for a disfigured cripple? The question ignites her rage, prompting her to strike the table and depart immediately. As Angelique and Margot head to the door, they find out that it is locked. One of the servants approaches them and informs them that they have to go out the back way. He states that the stairs lead to the river. Therefore, Margot grabs the fire torch and takes the lead. They descend the stairs cautiously, yet once Margot opens the wicket gate, she meets her tragic fate. But before she exhales her last breath, Margot urges Angelique to flee. After acknowledging that they murdered the servant, the soldiers run after Angelique. However, she succeeds in locking the gate before running back to the main room. Angelique traverses the gaming room, where she catches sight of Philippe engrossed in playing cards. Once Philippe recognizes her presence, he follows her. Yet Angelique grabs a lance and informs him that his father laid a trap for her. Philippe seems unsurprised, but dismisses any involvement. Angelique asks him to help her after delivering the sad news that Margot has been murdered. As a gentleman, Philippe rides the carriage alongside Angelique in an attempt to escape. However, soldiers cut their path, brandishing their swords. With no solution in hand, Philippe summons his courage and steps out to confront the men. Much to his luck, a masked man joins the scene, giving a helping hand. Philippe urges Angelique to flee, and so she does. We depict her racing through the corridors of the castle. However, the soldiers pursue her relentlessly. Eventually, they catch her, and despite her desperate attempts to escape, she is soon brought down to the ground. Just as it seems all is lost, luck favors her. One of the masked man's comrades intervenes and strikes the soldiers with a poleaxe, bringing them lifeless. The following scene takes place in the tranquil setting of the river, where we discover Angelique casting flowers into the waters, in remembrance of her servant Margot. Soon, Degrés approaches her, offering solace, and asks her to move on with their plan. In the next scene, Angelique stands before a mirror, her golden locks falling to the floor as she wields scissors. Determined to avoid recognition, she dyes her hair black. Degrés accompanies her to a safe haven, an acquaintance's discreet place. However, Angelique insists on meeting Geoffrey. In return, Degrés implores her to confide in him fully if she truly wishes to save her husband. He emphasizes the challenge of gaining access to the Bastille, but despite these obstacles, they manage to succeed. To avoid any suspicion, Angelique disguises herself as a prostitute and enters Geoffrey's cell. As she approaches her, Geoffrey recognizes her immediately. Overcome with emotion, they embrace each other tightly, with tears streaming down their faces. Concerned about his wife's well-being, Geoffrey orders Angelique to leave Paris, warning her of the dangers she faces. However, ever stubborn, Angelique refuses to flee, vowing to rescue him as soon as possible. Geoffrey recounts his past trials, poisonings, wounds, and near-demise experiences. He states a sentence that will be engraved in her memory. Even if she were to see his lifeless body, she should never believe that he is truly gone. Soon, the scene is sealed with a tender exchange of love and passionate kisses. In the following sequence, we witness Angelique and Degrés engaged in a secret conversation. He inquires about the letters, wondering whether she destroyed them. Angelique dismisses his concern, revealing that the letters are safely kept within the castle's walls. Therefore, he decides to help Angelique retrieve them. Angelique admits that the assistance of the lizard, Flippo, will facilitate their task. However, unbeknownst to them, an informant overhears their conversation and promptly departs to inform the authorities. The ensuing morning arrives with Geoffrey's trial. The Countess de Lazareff, Geoffrey's ancient courtesan, stands before the judge. When the latter questions whether Geoffrey opted for barbaric rituals and acts of witchcraft, she confirms the accusations, complicating the situation. Later that night, alongside Flippo, Angelique takes the boat and approaches the castle. After checking the loopholes, the letters are nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the soldiers arrive and pursue them. Angelique and Flippo run through the corridors of the castle for their lives. Philippe, ever helpful, rushes to their rescue. After entering a hidden door, they go through a concealed tunnel and end up safe. Philippe throws us a bombshell. It was he who took the letter. He confesses that, back then, he lingered after Angelique disappeared and decided to take the letter to make her pay for her insolence back then. Before handing over the letters, Philippe keeps one, wishing Angelique luck. Tearfully, she expresses her gratitude and hurries off to complete the final part of the plan. In the following scene, Philippe heads to his father, puts the letter on the table, along with his weapon, and departs with tears in his eyes. Soon, after checking the paper, Count de Plessis-Bellière shoots in the head. It is certainly a letter that spells trouble for him. In the morning, Degrés approaches Mr. de la Reynie and informs him that he accepts the last offer he extended him, but under one condition: he must meet the king. In the meantime, the king mourns the passing of his father. While he is accompanied by his ministers, Angelique succeeds in reaching out to him with the aid of Mr. de la Reynie by disguising himself as a maid. She hands him the plotters, revealing the persons who intended to slay him as a boy, and confirms the innocence of her husband. After checking the letters, the king throws them to the fire, believing that the plotters are no longer a threat to him, all under the eyes of the Prince de Condé and Fouquet, the real traitors. The Prince de Condé orders Fouquet to eliminate Angelique immediately. Shortly after, the scene reveals Geoffrey's verdict. Being guilty of plotting against church and king, Geoffrey will be at the stake until his passing. Angelique breaks down in tears, and on the other hand, Degrés refuses the verdict, describing it as a parody. The bailiffs apprehend the lawyer and attempt to escort him out. However, Sorbonne intervenes to rescue him. In the following scene, the masked man, Nicolas, accompanies Angelique to his kingdom. He blames her for making him a thief and a murderer. He reveals that her father broke his promise and sent men after him. He admits that he is sure that he will find her one day. Angelique, however, asks Nicolas to save Geoffrey, and she addresses his people. Geoffrey hid a treasure in his mansion, and she knows where it is, and if they release him, it will be theirs. Eventually, they fail to do so despite their best efforts. Geoffrey is seen at the stake in public, under the eyes of Angelique. She collapses on the ground. However, Degrés rushes to her aid. He accompanies her to a safe place and asks her to hide. He expresses his honor to serve her, before leaving her. He eventually succeeds in fleeing the soldiers. Angelique ends up in the river. Soon, her body is found. She passed away due to a cold, and the fish nibbled her skin. Philippe recognizes her identity, and she is announced deceased. However, before departing, he shares with Desgres a nod that carries a secret. In the following scene, Angelique wakes up after spending several days unconscious. Nicolas approaches her, informing her that Paparesse took her place. Angelique, Countess de Peyrac, drowned in the Seine. Angelique attempts to end her, yet Nicolas informs her that her sister and her husband have been exiled in the provinces, and her children are left with an unpaid nanny. After getting the address, Angelique rushes towards her children. She catches sight of them from afar, in a tragic condition. She reaches out, clasping their hands, but her escape is thwarted when a man confronts her, demanding payment. In desperation, Angelique stabs him with a knife and flees. With no other options, her destiny leads her back to Nicolas, who receives her with open arms, a poignant scene that seals the movie.